Welcome, everybody. Come on in the room. Come feel us. Come see us. I am so excited to do this panel. My name is Dawn Richard. I am an artivist, an ally, a friend of the Hip Hop Caucus. And not only that, I am ecstatic to be able to have the opportunity to have the platform to have these kind of conversations. So come in the room. Welcome. This panel, among many that the Hip Hop Caucus does, is about the cost of creativity. Why are you even thinking I'm going to do a panel about that? Well, for me as a creative, I sometimes feel like artists specifically, and when I say artists, guys, I mean creatives, not just musicians, but your painters, your illustrators, your podcasters, your artivists, people who love music but happen to go into philanthropy, people who love to paint but also choose to use their art where they're poets or comedians to be able to tell their story. Storytellers, tech startups that are living in the art space, right? It can vary. Creatives. We sometimes don't feel like we understand or are a part of the movement of philanthropy and advocacy. But specifically, I wanted to talk about the cost of creativity when it comes to environmental issues. And so I kind of sat down and was brooming and seeing who could be perfect for this, who could be perfect to have a conversation about how the environment is affecting the cost of creativity, how the lack of appreciation for our environment is affecting how we move in the space. And I immediately thought of these ladies, and I thought it would be really great to just sit down, bring artists into the room, creatives into the room, and talk about how this is directly affecting you. You may not think so, but it's there, whether you are Black, Indigenous, whether you are a creative that feels like I want to protect my brand and I don't want to touch it, regardless if you want to or not, it's affecting you and it's affecting our communities. So I wanted to have a sit down and just really get candid, have a conversation about why these things matter, and maybe along the way, touch some of the answers or questions you guys have about how to move in this space, how to be the first to talk about this stuff, and decide whether or not you still want to move in this space, decide if this space is for you, but most importantly, understand that the Hip Hop Caucus is providing safe spaces for us to have these candid conversations. So let's get into the panelists. These are my favorite people, y'all, so I'm gonna gas them. I'm gonna give them their flowers early because I love that about them and I love the work that they're doing. I'll start with my panelist, Dominique Drakeford. She is a home birth mother of two, environmental justice educator, writer, researcher, and creative storyteller who has spent over 15 years reimagining sustainability and social justice with a BA in business environmental just management, and a master's in sustainable entrepreneurship and fashion from NYU. Don't gas, a little bit though. She has led global lectures and workshops on decolonizing sustainability with features in over 30 major publications, including Essence, Vogue, Elle, Vanity Fair. I can keep going, but you know what I mean. She's doing the thing. Dominique co-founded Sustainable Brooklyn, curated the blog Melanin as co-produced the Root series via Conscious Chatter, and recently launched the podcast Compost, Cotton, and Cornrows, where she explores sustainability, culture, and justice through the Black liberation lens. Can I just get into the title? Compost, Cotton, and Cornrows is amazing. And then the incredible Christy Drutman, otherwise known as Brown Girl Green, a speaker, consultant, media producer, and environmental educator, passionate about working at the intersections between media, diversity, and environmentalism. As a young entrepreneur, Christy has educated hundreds of thousands of people across the globe about modern day environmental issues through speeches and media content, as well as facilities, workshops centered around environmental media and storytelling in cities across the United States. Christy is the co-founder of Green Jobs Board, a climate tech startup bringing the equity and inclusion gap, bridging the equity and inclusion gap within the green economy through conversations, resources, and pathways to bring more diverse talent into the environmental field. So give it up for Christy. Snaps. And then last but not least, the incredible Gaga Gatharu, a Kenyan-American climate activist and founder passionate about bringing empathetic and accessible climate communication to the mainstream. And that is exactly what we're doing right here. Wawa is the founder and executive director of Black Girl Environmentalists, the only national organization dedicated to addressing the pipeline and pathway issue for Black girls, women, and gender expansive individuals in the climate sector. Under her leadership, BGE has grown as a trusted national organization that has worked with 80 corporate and nonprofit partners. We are one of them, and hosted 120 plus events across 12 hub cities. In the summer of 2024, BGE launched the Hazel M. Johnson Fellowship Program, the first climate pipeline created for the environmental, let me get my bearings, y'all. I'm reading because she got so many things for and by Gen Z of color. With a membership of over 2,000. Forbes has called Black Girl Environmentalists one of the largest Black youth organizations in the country. Y'all, I'm messing up because the accolades are long with these ladies. Can you please give it up for my panelists? It's like one thing after the other of greatness. Hello, welcome, ladies. Yeah, snaps. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you guys. I want to dive right into this because this is a conversation before I even got to y'all. I had been feeling like top of the year, well, really 2024 was aggressive when it came to just like the amount of changes that were shifting for creatives, whether it be the film industry, whether it be how independent musicians navigate, how TikTok changed with the rules and things going on. And I was like, we need to get on a call or have a discussion about how these shifts are affecting us. So I want to start by asking you ladies, first, welcome, but ask, how are we navigating in this DEI challenged world right now, right? Exploring how artists and influencers can navigate the complexities of the DEI bans, how we are shifting political climate in this time, and the economic hardships faced in marginalized communities. How are we adjusting? How are you adjusting? Or how, if you're in this space, are you dealing with the impact of those changes happening in real time? Any one of you guys can step up to the plate first, but I guess I just want to have that conversation on a broad view because, right, both of you are founders of your nonprofit organizations. I know, Dominique, we have often conversations about this with the changing of rules and systems. How are we navigating in this space, and how is it directly affecting people that look like us and that do the things we do in our communities?
I can start. I was just going to say, for Green Jobs Board, we're seeing a lot of just more from the climate standpoint of things with sustainability and ESG. A lot of companies having to freeze some of their hiring processes because they're worried about what's going to happen to their grant funding. So maybe not even like necessarily a language shift, but literally like they're getting their grants frozen or they're getting some of their funding taken away. Because they are associated with, climate or DEI work. That's really scary when we're thinking about a long-term funding landscape on, how do we make sure that communities that are the most marginalized, who are passionate about these things, can still find, opportunities for funding and support. And we're seeing that at least on a government level, organizations or companies that were dependent on government funding or grants are really seeing a really significant blow to their income streams or upcoming programming because they depended on those grants to do that. And so I think a lot of people we're seeing maybe pivoting and figuring out how to navigate philanthropy or corporate sponsorship or things outside of the government, which I think we're going to continue to see a trend of. But it's super alarming. And, seeing so many companies that were really excited to scale and grow last year now saying, actually, we now have to downsize now. We actually don't know what our programming is going to look like in the next year to 5 years is really distressing when these are a lot of companies and organizations that I deeply admire that are doing incredible on the ground work. And to see them kind of, falter in this moment for very valid reasons, I think is nerve wracking when, these are the folks we look up to, the folks like leading the charge. And, there's just a lot of uncertainty. and a lot of fear that's being instilled in a lot of us at this time. But I think, I always lean on like the optimism and the collaborative approach. And I think a lot of people are now figuring out, innovative ways to work together now that resources are being threatened.
I mean, you nailed it. And I know you're speaking from a philanthropic angle, right? And I know for me as a creative, right, speak to that, even being someone that is an ally to an organization like yours or like Hip Hop Caucuses, we feel the brunt of that because we were finding ways to be able to use our like a lot of the Recording Academy and other really great initiatives in the music and artistic space. They partner with a lot of these, and they have their own nonprofit sectors. They have things that they do on the Hill, and that affects, right, the way in which we maneuver. If they cut funding in certain places based off those things, that means opportunities for streaming money, opportunities for performances, opportunities for co-collaboration don't happen, right? Because creatives lose those opportunities. So even hearing you say that, we're feeling it as artists because those collaborations that help bridge the gap to be able to do those things disappear as well. Dominique, Wawa, please join in at this because that's what I'm feeling and finding. Are you there, Dominique?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, we can.
Yes. So I've actually, what happened? Can you hear me?
No, I'm ready for it. Give it to me.
So I want to pull back the conversation just a tad, maybe from a macro lens, and perhaps discuss a little bit about the nonprofit industrial complex as we begin to sort of shift and reorient and reposition where we center value. I didn't start a nonprofit like other folks in this space, which y'all are dope. I grew up in the nonprofit world. Shout out to EOYDC. I just got laid off from a nonprofit like 2 weeks ago. And Dawn, the language that you use, I'm an ally to nonprofits and have partnered with several nonprofits. So I know firsthand sort of the layers of, beautiful impact, especially in the environmental space that nonprofits hold. Especially direct service organizations who are being funded to literally be in these streets saving lives. And so just prefacing this by saying like nonprofits can be and are very beautiful. And I'm actually in the midst of supporting the emergence of one as we speak. However, I think we do have to at least touch on the fact that nonprofits as a whole have always been part of an American model of systemic ownership and control. And we're literally seeing the ramifications of this. It's beautiful, but it's also fragmented, and both can be true. And that's why we're seeing this strain on funding especially for nonprofits that are justice seeking, that are community oriented, that are art driven. And so as I'm looking at these, looking at what DEI is doing, and I'm coming from the lens of Blackness, right? While also knowing that there's hella intersections that are affected, whether being a woman, womanhood, disabilities, LGBTQIA2S plus folks, certain religious groups who are ostracized, health challenges. It's a massive list of integration within the integrating into white male spaces in their system. But y'all, I have to be transparent, like again, from the black lens, while also knowing the intersections that a lot of Black folks are at the bottom of the pyramid. A lot of Black organized and operated nonprofits are at the bottom of the pyramid, when it comes to those who benefit from programs and initiatives, with white women being at the top, like the trifecta of wealth, power, and resources within the capitalist democracy is real. And historically, the system has always created these temporary privileges and sort of these backhanded handouts, and using this language of inclusive. And we have to be able to sort of get to the root of how an infrastructure is created if we want to have these discussions about our dependency on a system, how we want to move forward and continue to work within the system, and then how we want to create adjacent formulas for regenerative ecosystem building. So I'll let that sit for a moment, but I think it's important to context set and sort of discuss the system as we have these real ass conversations.
Love it. And you're right. And let's take the macro on it, because then once we address that, my biggest thing is once we continue to address it, right? What are the solutions? You know what I mean? That like, while that's happening, what are the ways in which we as a community can create opportunities for, number one, educating? Because I think some of us, because the whole premise of this was to get people like me, creatives, in the room to say, look, there are things happening, and those things are affecting how you draw, how you move, how you sing, how you work, how you like all of that. And I think sometimes we don't realize, because we're so artistic and we are so in the clouds of our dreams, we don't realize, like you said, that system, that infrastructure that is being built is affecting all of us and keeping us in a certain place. So when is it, and how is it, how are we, as we see the shifts in these situations, how do we create mechanisms and opportunities for our communities to live outside of these hits that happen, when these moments happen, when they decide to trickle and say, we're only going to give you a little bit. How do we give ourselves a lot? And I guess I'll lean on and ask, Wawa, being in something as beautiful as what you've created, this is the one where I would love to speak to, because you've offered plenty of jobs to Black women in this space. Do you feel the change? Does it affect something that has been built so beautifully? And how are you moving in this space? Because I think your contribution to this would be so helpful, because I feel like y'all have found solution-based opportunities to be able to still create moments for young Black girls. And I want to speak to those solutions, because I feel like you're kind of the one to be able to do that. Because we just got an email trying to see how we're going to work with you again. But I wouldn't imagine you're feeling something, but how are you rising above it?
Yeah, sorry about that earlier. My service is going in and out, so I hope that you all can hear me. But first, thank you for the contributions of Christy and Dominique, and I think we hit on a lot of important things that we need to really understand deeply in this moment, and really echoing what Dominique said around the fact that nonprofits can provide so much good. Obviously, like, I run a nonprofit, so I do have my own even personal biases around how nonprofits can help uplift climate justice and ensure that frontline folks and Black women and Black gender expansive folks are really centered in this work. But there are limitations by means of the system, and like Dominique said, we're seeing that system really unravel, if we're being completely honest. Last week I was in Chesapeake Bay with over 100 executive directors or funders who are committed to climate work. And I'm going to be frank and say that our movement's infrastructure is being impacted by this current moment. And it even troubles me to say moment, because so much of what we're seeing right now and people's reaction to it is due to historic amnesia. Like, nothing that's happening right now is happening out of nowhere. There's some people that are saying, this pushback on so-called DE&I, which then is connected to climate and environmental justice, is a response to, the 2023 overturn of affirmative action, when in reality, like, we've had this very clear and loud undercurrent of anti-affirmative action, which just means anti-Blackness, for the past 150 years. Like, you can call out Reconstruction era, civil rights, Reagan presidential, time, 2020 now. Like, we've been building up to this moment. Like, folks have been building up to this particular moment to have an administration that would give them the legal breath to be able to really create the sort of blows that we're seeing happen to our movement. And it's not just happening in regards to funds being restricted. Like, there are so many organizations that we work with that directly impacts our work, who have been currently are being withheld from funding that they've already signed, like countersigned contracts with the federal government, right? But there are organizations like Greenpeace, for example, who are being sued, $600 million over a defamation suit with a, fossil fuel company. Like, we are really in scary times, and I think, like, right now what we need in the solution era is really radical collaboration. It's like coming together and figuring out how we're going to continue to do good work when the battleground is changing. And that's why I think it's so great to, work with folks on the Hip Hop Caucus seat. And I feel like, Black Environmentalists, our team, are really leaning into working along others who are thinking critically of how do we move different in this moment. And I don't necessarily have the answers of what that even looks like in the next 6 months, because again, the landscape is changing so fast and so drastically. But like, it is our duty, right, as being folks that are committed to this work, to continue to find ways to make the things happen, to continue to resist, because again, like, the same thing we're seeing with with this anti-environmental justice D&I nonsense. The same way that we can see it has happened in history, there have been people that have been able to manage to resist and still find ways to build ecosystems of care outside of those dominant mainstream forces. So as history has proven, we will find a way, and we will continue to move forward.
One thing you said, Wawa, was real. You said radical collaboration, right? Is that what you said? And I believe in that. Like, what does that radical collaboration look like for us? You know what I mean? Like, what ways in which, and I know this is where I feel a two-sided thing, right? Because once again, it feels like Black women have to, on their shoulders and, right, take it on and make it make sense. But what does radical collaboration look like so that we can at least preserve the beauty of these organizations that we have, preserve what the ancestral stories that we have, and be able to have these natural and candid conversations to be able to keep educating our people? Because my fear is that if we don't, we lose our stories, and our stories and the stories we have, the storytelling that we're doing by way of the organizations that we're building, will be stripped. So how do we develop these candid, these radical conversations, these radical collaborations? How do we magnify that? How do we do that in our moment? Any one of you can come up to it. But I guess after hearing about the systems and the imperfectness of the nonprofit, though it is beautiful, how can organizations like yours, the ones that you're doing, or like the podcast you have, Dominique, where you're like having the same moment, you're educating, talking about our ancestral stories of our culture through sustainability. How do we radically collaborate?
Yeah, I think, it's a really important question in this moment. And I think a lot of people are, I don't want to say like going back to basics, but are kind of like getting off the internet and doing in-person organizing and reconnecting with their communities. I think, getting back to like reconnecting with like who's in your area, understanding what tools and resources they have, being able to create, groups for collective action in your own area, I think is really important. And I think like, people have been doing this for decades with organizing. And I think sometimes with like, using digital media platforms, even as, an advocate and organizer myself on these platforms, I think there has been a lot of polarization and a lot of cancel culture and a lot of things that happen on the internet that prevents maybe some more people from wanting to activate or engage in this, even from like, the news is just really depressing and it's just a fact, and it can lead to a lot of doom scrolling and just feeling like there's nothing you can really do. And so I feel like people being able to organize, community meetups and mutual aid groups, I think people are starting to like shift into that more and more, because they're realizing that these things have its limits, that like we can use these digital tools, but they can't be our end all be all, especially when algorithms are censoring BIPOC creatives on their platforms, and even using certain keywords like talking about climate change or even DEI, I think is good going to continue to be censored. So in my mind, I'm like, radical collaboration for me is like, how can we like, you know, all of us have these like really amazing, incredible online communities and networks. Like, how can we continue to leverage those to continue to build momentum in the streets, like in person through community organizing, and like, you know, build more of those partnerships with existing organizations that have been doing that on the ground work, and leveraging, you know, our ability as creatives to tell those stories more meaningfully to reach more audiences that will hopefully, you know, continue to drive and mobilize people to support those on the ground efforts. So yeah, just wanted to start.
I mean, that sounds like what we were doing, what we do normally culturally, right? We go to our neighborhoods and we talk, right? We have neighborhood meetings. Go to your neighbor. Like it's got to start. We got to go back to the things before they, you know what I mean, before they said we weren't those things. We got to go back to the ancestral things we used to normally do, right? Where we talk to each other in community neighborhoods, block parties, opportunities like that. That's what you're saying, is to be able to go back to the grassroots level of things and say, though online is fine, you know, going to your neighbor and talking to your people and hearing their stories and seeing how you can make impact that way may be helpful. Anybody else? I'm open to this, because I think having these solutions, right? Once we name the issues, because there are many, and we could keep going. What can the people who are new to this, or even still in this, or are true to this, how do they figure out how to be impactful in these moments?
Yeah, I think like, speaking as someone who exists in the nonprofit industrial complex, I'll be completely honest. Like, I think like, even if like, obviously those of us who work in nonprofits that do climate and environment work. Oh, am I cutting in and out?
No, you perfect.
Okay. You know, we're obviously invested in making sure we're protecting people and planet, but because climate is the least funded issue out there, like there is like a scarcity undercurrent, especially now, like not necessarily in the ways that we interact with each other, but just like kind of having scarcity of an organization thinking, you know, we have a budget for the rest of this year, maybe not next year, and et cetera. I think we need to be really radical in the way that we're collaborating with other organizations and like sharing resources. An example of that is like sharing legal resources. Like there's a lot of small organizations that simply don't have the capacity to, for example, have a strong legal defense if they were to be targeted. Like there are lots of folks right now that are fearful about sharing about their programs, even writing op-eds that could potentially cause them and their team to come under fire from random, you know, losers online, and even folks that can come and like disturb their peace like in person. I've met so many folks that in the past 1 month, 2 months have had like Proud Boys come to their homes and like abuse them and their loved ones because of their commitment to this work. And a lot of these folks do not come from organizations that have the capacity to have a lawyer on staff, for example. There are organizations that have capacity to have like general counsel. Like that's something that should be extended to other organizations. That's like a capacity issue that needs to be better supported, not just, you know, through funders, but like through like the climate nonprofit ecosystem. The other thing is like, maybe on a more radical end, I actually think we have too many nonprofits. Like I think in this moment we should be bringing more folks together under like shared missions, just because as the landscape continues to change, like I think we do need more people working together more intimately. And sometimes that means having like to bring missions together and work together in new ways that maybe aren't under the organizational umbrella that folks have previously been working under. So, I mean, I think we're going to end up seeing a lot of this. I'm sure we're all seeing it. There are organizations that are likely going to be closing in the next 6-12 months. The infrastructure of not just climate work, but social impact work, because of our reliance on like federal funds, for example, or even funders who have traditionally funded work that is in this terrain, is changing. And like we're not necessarily seeing particularly funders really double down at the rate that we need. Radical collaboration means radically shifting our strategies.
Dominique, I saw you go on mute.
Yeah.
Go ahead and yeah, go ahead.
100%. I'm in agreement with everything that y'all have lifted up. We are at a critical juncture where we have to redesign internal and intercommunal systems and coalition build in a way where it is rooted in Sankofa, right? So looking at what our ancestors did in the past, what our elders are currently doing in order to look towards the future, and then create a rubric collectively that makes sense for the here and now. Like if we're looking at examples like the Black arts movement in the 60s and 70s and you know, various art-centered movement building elements, I think that that's extremely critical. I think creatives, non-traditional educators, storytellers are going to be the pulse of building community. I think they're going to be now more than ever an important bridge to marketing, an important bridge for sharing policy, and an important bridge for decolonizing and re-education. I saw a quote the other day that was something along the lines of, we come from a people who turn their homes into schools, their pain into poetry, and their rage into revolution. And I think that is an element of Sankofa that's hella critical right now. Again, I'm always going to bring up historical examples like Maroon communities who were enslaved Africans who established independent societies. Like, I think we have to look at how so many communities who created the sustainability blueprint, how they navigated the type of bullshit that we're dealing with now, right? And then, so agreeing, there's the community building aspect. And then I think that there is the ecosystem building aspect, which to me, that's the micro, it's a little bit more of the macro. So being able to focus on the community care piece and connect, really connect intercommunally. And then the ecosystem building is being able to share knowledge and resources and financial sustainability elements in a longer span, a longer reach geographically. I think that Mark Cuban, I don't know if y'all saw that South by Southwest quote where he advised that Black women founders stop looking for funding and build capital independently. It pissed me off because that's the system we live in, and we've always had to do shit like this. But at the same time, I think those alternative systems of care are alternative ways of divesting from situations that no longer serve us and finding ways to radically collab. You're in New Orleans. I think the Black school does a great job of that. They have an aggressive strategy for creating coins in a way that they've divested from a lot of the mainstream systems that are very predatory. And so looking at regenerative funding models, because at the end of the day, financial sustainability is a big piece of this, right? We can absolutely be in these streets advocating. We can absolutely community build. We can absolutely have our feet in the soil doing this shit just from the passion piece, but we also got to talk about the economic valuation of it too. We got to talk about how we can build, you know, sustainably while also funding ourselves and having the coins, the regenerative coins, to be able to sustain the levels of justice that we're seeking. And so there are needs that need to be met now that involve community, because a lot of folks are in survival mode, right? We can't talk about this hypothetically without bringing in the fact that folks are scrambling to literally survive. And so I just want to offer that there's a lot that we have to do, but I think I like to break it down into micro and macro because it allows me to be able to project an offering that encompasses as many souls as possible within this fragmented colonial system. So I think that we have to create, and I don't even want to say content, but we have to educate and provide resource intercommunally in such an aggressive way right now. And that's, you know, you mentioned my podcast. We have to be able to connect so aggressively and use our creative ingenuity in a way like by any means necessary, like our life depends on it, in order to continue to connect and build. And hopefully, I think the goal hopefully is we figure out a way within coalition building to really create that rubric that folks can all go to. It doesn't matter your geographic location. It doesn't matter your experiences. It doesn't matter, you know, your cultural whatever, but there needs to be somewhat of a foundational blueprint, or else folks are just running around
in their silos.
in their silos trying to survive. And so that's something that's been on my heart, is how can we bring in all of the incredible people and organizations and initiatives and archival histories and all of that, and somehow create somewhat of a standard rubric to begin to get to pull folks in that is accessible. And I'm talking about accessible no matter, you know, your income, accessible no matter your reading level, accessible no matter all of these things, because we are still speaking to each other in our own language, folks in the sustainability space, folks in the environmental space. So if we just have to be mindful of how we're communicating and really use our creative assets.
Well, and that's so to lead into that, which is why somebody asked me, well, why you want to do a panel for creatives and have these people as the panelists? And I was like, because that's the point, right? Creatives create stories. Creatives tell the stories. They have platforms speaking artistically, and the power of the voice, the power of art is transcendent. It's universal, right? And so I don't want us to keep having conversations where the environmental culture and sustainable culture speaks over here, and then creatives are kind of over here, and they like, oh, I like that girl that one time I saw on TikTok, right? Or they don't even know what a petrochemical is, but half of the artists is from Texas, Ohio, River Valley. Like 2 Grammy winners, or one nominated artist, part of our artivism class, Duran Bernard, the amazing Duran, is an artivist on our artivist class of 2024. From Cleveland, Ohio, had no idea about petrochemicals. And if you don't know what a petrochemical is, it is chemicals that come from crude oil, natural gas that is not natural. And to put it lightly, it's in your clothes, your makeup, it's the plastics and all the things that make up your bad air, all right, your polluted air. He didn't even know what that was, yet he's from the Ohio River Valley, right? Tank and the Bangers. Tank won a Grammy. Shout out to Tank, a part of our artivist class. And Tank didn't even know what was going on in her backyard. We had the Essence Festival. We had Essence Festival last year. We had YY Speak. Big Frida was on the panel. And Frida was talking about how both their parents died of cancer. This is real. So whether artists want to feel like they're a part of it or not, they ask me, why do a panel like this? Because creatives don't even know it's in their backyard. They don't even know it's affecting them. And so we have to meet people where they are. And the reason why they don't know is because the silos are talking, but nobody's being able to lean and cross that radical collaboration that you're talking about. So to me, this is an example of that radical collaboration. What you just said, Dominique, is that we have to get to a place where it's ride or die time. We have to all start sitting in the same rooms, and whether we want to hear it or not, we got to be able to say, okay, as a creative, how does this affect me? Well, the plastics and the supplies that you buy, you have to figure out whether they're made from the petrochemical plant that's down the street from your mama or your daddy, right? If you want to talk about like wages and how your streaming is affected by the people that's in office. So let's talk about voting and what that means for like your streaming and the energy that's used to do all the things. we have to start asking those questions, and we can't ask them in the rooms like this. We have to start getting uncomfortable, or maybe even being a little bit under the know. Maybe we don't know, but by the time we leave the conversation, we're a little bit better versed into what's going on. And just sitting in a room with the three of you who are on three different aspects of the journey, right? It feeds to me to say, how do I then apply this? Something as basic as saying, well, let me look into my community and see what plants are around my neighborhood, or how can I maybe do a tour that's green, and maybe tour like sustainably, and then maybe talk to Wawa, or maybe talk to Dominique. It's just talk to her about what does she mean by ancestral background? Like, what does that mean? Maybe I could connect to that, or like just something as simple as you mentioned Sankofa, but we just had our Indians mask in Mardi Gras in New Orleans, and the amazing Queen Taj did the Sankofa, like the ancestors was beaded on the garb. And again, something so simple, but it would have been beautiful if Taj could have met you and understood the value, because I know Taj knows the history of why she beaded what she beaded on her Indian suit. But to sit there and have the story be told and talk about the parallels of what you're talking about is powerful. And I do believe in that. So when you say that, I feel this, and I mean, we're getting, we were supposed to go somewhere else, but y'all got me riled up. I want to ask, do you feel like this is, even though it feels low, even though it feels gloomy, do you feel like this is an opportunity for us as a people to start to mobilize and be forced to do the community and the communal work, like on having our own financial journey, having our divesting and mobilizing? Do you feel like this situation now forces us as a people to be able to say, this time to collaborate in this level, to stop having these silo organizations, to stop investing in this, and to start pouring into us? Do you think it's forcing us to have that moment right now, that Mecca moment? Or have we been here before and it's a no?
Wait,
Don't
rephrase the question, Dawn. No. Rephrase the question.
What I'm saying, based off
I was
of what's
answering
happening.
a question in the chat. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's sorry. Okay. I was saying that based off, I'm just listening to you guys, and it sparked something in me to say, you're all saying like, we need to mobilize, like the time is now. And it made me feel like, though we're in dire times comes positive solution. And I'm saying, do you feel like we are now forced? We've been talking about collaborating as nonprofits and creatives and storytellers, but now we're in a survival mode where money is being lost, money is being divested. That Mecca that we talk about when we speak about investing in ourselves, pouring into our own communities, do you think this forces us now to truly make that choice, because now we're our backs against the wall, or we know that's not the case? Just from what I'm listening to from all of you.
I guess just like building off of everything people said, I think organizations at this point who don't choose to do that probably are going to cease to exist. Who don't choose to lean into collaboration, I feel like there's not really a choice anymore. Almost like I feel like people are realizing that. So when I heard that question, I'm just like, I think people that are going to stay stuck in their silos or scarcity mindset and are just like going to be me about it are probably, I don't know how long those ones are going to really be able to stick around. I think people who are able to collaborate are going to be able to weather this storm, to be honest with you.
But that's what I mean by, like, I feel like though this may feel negative, maybe we needed this push to be able to say, you know what I'm saying? Like, either you
100%.
collaborate with each other or you're going to not have it. And maybe we needed that. I'm just listening, right? I was going somewhere.
I'm agreeing.
Yeah.
Let me one second. I thought we were going to have this level of urgency the first time the man was in office. So now he's here for a second time, and there's an immediacy, there's an adrenaline of urgency that's sitting in folks' spirit, and rightfully so. And I think, and I'm not saying, I got to choose my words carefully.
Please, because we are a nonpartisan organization, and I want to make sure
right.
But I do think you should know. But hey, listen, I don't want to censor you though, because you say candid, so I don't want to censor you because that's
no. Look,
I
I
want y'all to be
understand
real.
the
This is
need
what
to
this
be
conversation
strategic.
is. Yeah.
I've been in I understand the need to be strategic in the vocal cords.
Strategic, but also candid, because one of the things that I promised myself if I ever was a part of this is that we be real. What makes this different than the rest is that I want y'all to say what you feeling. I want you to, because that's how we talk. That's how the creatives in my world speak. So I don't want to censor you. I just want to make sure I have to put the disclaimer out, but then you go ahead and do your thing.
Right. I'ma just say that that the colonial pathology would have continued to be swept under the rug, and the level of intrinsic dysfunction that happens within the ecosystem that maintains white wealth and power would have continued to be pushed under the rug. So all I'm gonna say is, I of course didn't want this man in office, but I think as a culture who has been conditioned to move and be okay with certain things because, you know, there's a little bit of privilege and a little bit of stipend with that privilege. I think now we are amped up in a way because the level of scarcity is at an all-time high. I'm a leave it poetic like that and say and I'm gonna just yeah, so I'm in agreement with you. The urgency is real, but for many people the urgency has always been there. The urgency has always been there. But folks can put a veil over it. Right? And so yeah, now that things are kind of split wide open and made visible in ways that it wasn't before, despite the fact that they've been there, you know, the facade of civil liberties, I'm gonna say, I'm just saying that I'm agreeing with you, or I'm nodding to the fact that it's time. And like Christy said, you will get left behind if you don't if you're not building and redesigning how you're moving based on the realities of our environment.
Y'all talking, and I agree with you too, Christy. Like if you don't do it, you're left behind. Wow, you were gonna say something. I just wanted to agree because both of y'all are spitting. There are verses being had right now.
Well, actually, I feel like all that's been said has been said, to be honest. I was just out here being like, yep.
Amen. Tabernacle.
And you cracked me up.
It's just because I was going somewhere else, but like everything was being said and I was being taken on a ride. And I was like, wait, but this is real. Because these are the conversations, right, that I be wanting to have. And I'm just like, I'm realizing it in real time. Like maybe this is the fire that needed to happen. And it's shame on us if we don't take precedence in it right now. And honestly, truthfully, to Gen Z, I feel like they already was like, what y'all doing? And it was sometimes I feel like the older people are set in their ways, but they feeling it in a level that they've never felt it. And now they're looking around and say, okay, I think this is a smart opportunity. And so I really believe if we start, and shout out to Stefan Coward, who's a part of our Justice Paid in Full at Hip Hop Caucus. He's been a lot dealing with economic wealth for Black people, divesting in the spaces that don't need to, like banks that are investing in petrochemicals and fossil fuels, and take away from that and start pouring into our Black communities. Another thing that I was proud of that we had done similar to this was we had a panel on philanthropy and the importance of moving it forward. And normally it would be all banks for Stefan, all the banks on it. And I was like, Stefan, what if we got VCs, Black venture capitalists, a part of the conversation so that we could talk about once you do invest in a bank, how they can then support the investors, the Black investors, so that when young talent startups come up, Black startups, they know where to go and what banks to talk to, right? Instead of siloing it. And everybody thought it was the most profound thing. And I was like, it's crazy that we don't believe that those two should be there. It was such a beautiful panel because you had an aspect of the VC perspective and the bank perspective, all Black people, but telling each other like the shifts in how Black investors can invest in, how this looks, how the market is changing, all in the same breath. So if someone was coming as a startup, they felt like not only were they able to see the bank's perspective, but also once the money is there, they can see a venture capitalist. So again, like pouring into unification rather than having panels talking to each other, like to the same people. All right, I'm out.
And
I'm
Don,
not.
I just
I'm
want to
not
jump in and say
Wait.
something.
Oh, go ahead.
okay, go ahead.
I just want to say something because I want to lovingly push back on the narrative around the Gen Z situation, because I think we have to be so clear about who we're talking about when we talk about Gen Z. Like the past presidential election, plus the more that we're learning about like media trends of young people, particularly Gen Z is a lot further right than we previously thought. So much so that in every conversation where people are like, yeah, Gen Z, I'm like, well, if we really look at the numbers, it's like Black girl Gen Z, some of the Black boy Gen Z. Like, to be honest, Gen Z, they've been left behind. I think a little bit because I think it's because there's this. It's true, right? Young people have led virtually every social movement. Young people have this vibrancy. Young people have this, I don't want to say innate, but there's something about, experiencing the world in the first like 20-25 years of life and having the audacity to dream of something bigger before you've had a chance to be jaded, right? And I don't mean that to infantilize the situation by any means. I'm a young person myself, but I actually think one of the things that we need to push forward in this radical collaboration and taking this moment for what it is we need more funding into young voices that aren't like these really scary far right voices. Like the far right does a really good job on investing in the voices of like up and coming radical right folks. And like in our spaces, we are not investing particularly in young men who are like, climate justice activists, right? Like folks who are pushing forward these narratives that are so important for the youth. Like we aren't getting that. We're actually missing that leadership. So in this moment, I think we really have to call it out for what it is and say, there are some Gen Z that are about it, and then there's a lot of Gen Z that actually aren't about it. They need to be called in.
I love that. And thank you this is why I want it, because you are Gen Z yourself and you're telling me the realities of it. I'm only going from the circle that I know, not the world and the span that you have. So I need you to tell me that. I need to know that. And that's why that conversation is important. Dominique, you was going to say something.
Yeah, real quick. Just a thought I had in terms of radical collaboration. And I guess it's somewhat adjacent to what you and Wawa have both lifted up recently, is that a rule of thumb that I have, and I think it, is nice to share with folks, is that everybody on this panel has some level of public facing influence, right? When we go into spaces, safe spaces, it's critical that we name at least 3 to 5 other people within those spaces, whether it's a panel, whether you're speaking intimately with somebody else of influence. We need to be naming each other, whether they are well known or not. And I think that is one way, a very surface, basic level way, that we can continue to circulate and amplify, especially Black and brown folks who are in this space, who are doing great work. Mention other people when you have opportunities as much as possible. Show them their website on the spot. This is their Instagram. This is their email. This is how you should connect with them. They need funding here. Oh, you mentioned this? Oh, I know so-and-so who has this great idea. Connect with them, or be that source of bridge making. I think that is extremely critical and very baseline when it comes to radical collaboration and ecosystem building. So I just want to share that and hope that everybody, continues to do that baseline thing.
I really love that. And I want to add on by saying, like, for creatives out there, specifically ones that do take corporate sponsorships or people that like do brand partnerships, I think there's also a huge opportunity to be able to pitch as a consultant internally to those partnerships. Like, if you have influence as a creative to have those relationships with organizations or companies or philanthropies that do have that funding, always keep, especially smaller, like BIPOC run environmental justice organizations in mind, and figure out, is there a way in your collaboration with, these entities that do have that funding, figure out also similarly 3 to 5 organizations you're going to have in your back pocket to either recommend for grant funding, for partnerships, for ways that, like, if you're going to do a brand partnership, like I worked with a brand a couple of years ago, and like we partnered with, a New York City based environmental justice organization to do planting and gardening, and but that was baked into the partnership, and like, I made sure that was part of the partnership. And I think we need to start rethinking the ways in which we are structuring these partnerships, and to realize that there is more possibility. Like, these, especially corporations and philanthropies, have so much funding, so much power, so much influence. If we are bridge builders as creatives and we're in those rooms, like, we should also be coming with new visions, new imaginations of what those projects can look like, and already be plugging our people into those pitches, plug those people into, how you see them fitting into that ecosystem. I think as a creative, most of us have entrepreneurial skills, but we're not always implementing it that way. We're just thinking about how to get our bag, which I get you. Yes, as we've all discussed, financial sustainability is important. But again, if we're going to lift all boats, if we're going to think about collaboration being essential to our long-term survival and sustainability, then we have to embed that in how we're pitching, how we're moving, how we're building and redistributing that funding too.
Christy, you better tell a word. You better tell a word. And this is where I lean into when you say creatives, and I mean it. And I can only speak to, like, I know you're speaking to all overall creatives, but I want to have a moment to speak to my artist. What Christy just said is gold. Because as an independent artist right now, most independent artists or even artists with label, you have so much power, which means when you walk into a room and you say you want to do a show or you want to be able to collaborate with other brands, you have the ability to do deep research, to know what sponsorships, what brands make sense to you and for your people and your community. You'd be surprised how many Black, like I said, Black VCs, Black banks, Black organizations, like, you'll be surprised how many amazing organizations out there that are clean, that are green, that are a part of your ancestry, that are a part of your culture, that help your people, that you can latch on to be able to have a equal amount of equity. I'll repeat that, an equal amount of equity, which means you get something from them, being that it's positive, it's uplifting your people, and then they get a part of your brand. That trade helps amplify our people. So I would encourage musicians and artists specifically, when you're looking at branding, look at the accolades, look at the things they do, look how your brands move. And if they don't move in the movement of uplifting your people, maybe you should rethink and get innovative about the way in which you want something to be on your name. I know that sounds like crazy because you're saying, well, oh, but if there's money, like Christy said, if there's a bag, I want to take it. But I will encourage you to say there are artists out here that are figuring out how to have vegan concerts, how to have their tour merch made by sustainable businesses that are all Black owned, consultations where they put before their shows, they have videos of like SZA has had a video showing or speaking about a climate change, or having you a video before your show saying, I just want to let everybody know $2 of my ticket sales are going towards such and such. Or if you can use a reusable cup out, like just simple things that can help amplify your culture. I think for artists, we forget, like Christy said, creators, not only are we entrepreneurial, but we have the ability to build our own ecosystems. We have that ability because innovation is in us. So we have to start being innovative in the way in which we move. And while we're able to control the bag that we have because of social media, we can control the bag in our favor for our people. I hope that made sense. All right.
Real quick, last one.
No, go keep going. We ain't got no last one. Let's go.
Adding to this conversation, I think of tips, right? Where I think we're in the space of elevating advice. I think every creative should have a database that they created, right? Your database should be comprised of organizations that you fuck with, artists that are really dope, philanthropic advocacy entities that are ethical, grants that are ethical, funding opportunities that you saw on Instagram, business cards, you collected business cards at an event, somebody who you vibed with. Every artist, and I think this is the business side of artistry that we're not always privy to and we're not always thinking about when we're out in the world connecting and scrolling and doing all of these things.
And
but
they don't want you
a
to have
database exactly a database is a critical ecosystem building tool that can elevate relationship building. So I think that's also a good tip to that artists should be reimagining and actively engaging in. All right, I'm done.
I promise y'all, like we had a whole different question situation, but it took me. We went. I have one more question, and then hopefully you guys are seeing the questions in the chat, because I see that Dominique is answering some. I'll ask one more and then we'll lean into the chat if you guys want to. So right now, if you guys want to start putting any questions that you may have, please line them up in the comments. I'm going to ask them one more question. And if I see a question after this question, we can answer it before we close. I specifically wanted to speak to the petrochemical situation because I personally am going through that. From Louisiana, we have something called Cancer Alley, and we have had several site fights that Hip Hop Caucus has been fighting toward. And I again explained to you guys what petrochemicals are. And it has been traumatic for me personally because both my parents were diagnosed with cancer. And it has been a fight that I've had to deal with. And I know that for some people, they may not resonate with this, but I wanted to ask, what can consumers and creatives play? Like, what role can they play in reducing the reliance of petrochemicals? Which means, what can they do to stop? How can we as creatives stop leaning into the plastics or the petrochemical lined products that lean into our work? How can we get creative? And I ask this because I know, Dominique, you work in sustainability. I know Wawa, you work very heavily with artists, whether it's, like boxes of waters at the shows, or with something like Billie Eilish. What Billie Eilish did was going through the food, to support the food way. And of course, Billie Eilish is a massive artist, so that's something separate. But the concept of it, how can we help artists be less reliable on petrochemically made products? Any one of you can answer. I know for me, my choice was, from my shows, trying to use reusable cups so that there's less plastic within the space. And again, like, that's something small, but I guess I'm just trying to help creatives on a small level, specifically people of our color, because we are the ones riddled with asthma. We are the ones riddled with cancer. We are the ones where they're building these facilities next to in our neighborhoods. So I'm just trying to find ways to teach my creatives how to think differently when it comes to utilizing things that hurt their own communities. And is that even possible? Any one of y'all?
So I could speak a little bit from my wheelhouse. Yeah, yes, in the grand scheme of things, sustainability, but a lot of my wheelhouse has actually been focused on the fashion side. One of the guests that I had on my podcast, Mahida, she talks about the parallels of, or she talked about in the episode, she talked about the parallels of food apartheid systems and how those strategies apply to brick and mortar fashion accessibility. So like urban development, making sure that poor Black and brown folks were residentially zoned in locations that were saturated with synthetic fibers and BS food, and petrochemicals from the clothing that's on our skin to the disposability of the disposability use of food and just everyday objects. And so from a pulled out sustainability lens, I think it's critical to tap into the ecosystem of environmental racism, because what you're talking about, petrochemicals, especially in Black and Brown communities, is all about environmental racism and the effects, the toxic effects on Black and Brown, poor, indigenous, immigrant communities. So I think my biggest advice around that, because it's such a huge undertaking, is to find creatives, non-traditional educators, storytellers who are breaking down environmental racism. And once you find those creators, they begin to tell you how to divest from petrochemicals, but more importantly, they're able to create a paradigm shift in understanding so that you know how it even affects you and your direct community, because we are oftentimes on the front lines of receiving the impacts of petrochemicals, whether it is our clothes or in our food or in our home product spaces. So, and I'm sure Wawa is a bomb ass educator, and she could probably give you a direct links to that. But I always like to give sort of a pulled out ideology and framework when answering these type of questions.
And helpful, always helpful. Thank you.
I mean, Dawn, I want to take this moment to lift you up, because I think the work that you do is so critical in actually answering this question in action. Like, you yourself are an artist. You are someone that a lot of people have, grown up with as a musical artist, but you're leveraging your own lived experience and your relationship with other creatives to bring the conversation around environmental racism and connecting the dots between the petrochemical industry, the history of enslaved peoples and the lands that have been continued to be used for exploitation for hundreds of years, in a way that is so necessary, to the point where I think like that model is one that needs to be recognized, acknowledged, and replicated. So I feel like you have a unique role in this movement that, in a lot of ways, or not even a lot of ways, just straight up is indispensable, and that there are a lot of creatives that I think and know can learn from you in figuring out how to do this well. And like leaning on that model, I think at the end of the day, right, I think sometimes people feel the need to like be an expert before they speak on something. And I use the word expert specifically around like we associate expertise with like a degree or like a very specific lived experience. Like, those are great, but you actually can just be a concerned citizen and be someone that uses your platform to share these things. And it's okay not to know everything. And actually, I think being someone that doesn't know everything and is still attempting to collaborate and attempting to take those steps to learn and sharing that process and intention with your audience is actually really relatable, and is a gateway for other people who might have their own, personal feelings around not wanting to learn more or share more on their own platforms, whether they're creative or not, because they are an expert. Seeing someone else go through that process openly, I think, could be quite inspiring. So, I think you're doing an amazing job, and that we're learning from you.
Thank you, Wawa. I love you. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. It's weird when people talk about me. Thank you. So I hope creatives, you've heard that and know that. I think the biggest thing there, Wawa said, is real too. Is like, you don't have to be an expert. Just come into the room and learn. You know what I mean? I'm seeing mad questions come, so I want to be able to read them. Alicia asked, how do we help Black and Brown communities be able to digest these concepts like climate resiliency enough to be recognized, the good they are already doing, and how to consciously invest in just the conversations of progression?
Can you guys hear me? Sorry, my camera
Yes, we
just
can.
like
We
had
can,
all
Christy.
these weird issues. Thank you so much. I love this question. I think it's really important for people to understand that there's a lot of wisdom within their own communities. So I think when we're saying like, you know, helping Black and Brown communities, I think it's important to understand that there's a lot of incredible leaders within those communities that maybe don't get the same kind of radar or presence in mainstream media. And a lot of my work that I've done, yeah, with Brown Girl Green, like on my podcast and show historically, has been specifically, you know, finding those leaders that don't typically get highlighted and to uplift the leadership that they already have. Because I think people, you know, can maybe watch videos and listen to experts, but if they don't sound like someone that comes from their area, they're not going to necessarily trust it. They're not going to necessarily like find it relatable or have it resonate. So, you know, I've been seeing some incredible media organizations, which I am half like so tired right now that I'm forgetting the name of one, but I can send it later on. That's basically investing in journalists in local areas, especially in areas in the South that don't typically have the same kind of funding to do on the ground journalism in their areas. But I think we need more of that. We need to be putting more funding into local journalism and to build out toolkits and support systems to support journalists and creatives and storytellers that exist in their own communities. I actually, yeah, and I'm definitely happy to send a few examples of that. But I've been seeing some more organizations that are actually like, yeah, funding storytellers to like teach people in places like Atlanta or, you know, in New Orleans and etc. Like funding people that live there and being like, hey, why don't we talk about clean energy or reducing plastics, but like specifically in your neighborhood? And I think we're seeing a few of those models shifting, and I think that's great. So I'd say why we should be building more funds to invest in local journalism, and B, I would say if there are people in communities or activists that you feel need to be uplifted whose stories haven't been told, share that story.
I love that. Thank you so very much. We are getting to a close to this. I could go on with you guys. I could go on and on. Like this was so good. This is the kind of conversations that feed me. I have no words to express how much I love y'all. Y'all know that. Like I try to email y'all at least like once a month, like just to say how much I adore you guys and ask you to do things and be present, because I just, as an artist, for me in my life, I don't think I would have been able to make it through my mother and father's journey with cancer if I wasn't educated to what was going on in our world. And it would not have been if it weren't for the beautiful people that I've met along the way that has been giving me grace and patience to explain these things at just basic level, because I had no clue. I had no clue. One thing I saw on the side of the chat that I thought was really cool was someone said that they do bike ride concerts, powered, like electric bike powered concerts that they do. I thought that was really cool. They do it for Earth Day. So like just thinking of like that's so cool. Like just really, and we can get so innovative as a unit, as a team for artists, as we just decide how we go about working together. I thought that was really cool. But I want to thank my panelists. Make sure you follow them on Instagram, guys. If you will want to, my panelists, if you want to put it into the chat to your Instagram so people can follow you, because I think it's important that not only you leave this panel being invigorated by what's there, but like truly press the follow button, truly follow along with what these women are doing. And then in return, check out who they're following, because they are probably following other incredible people that are moving our community forward. I have a call to action for the people that's watching. Could you please text climate to 79591? Again, if you can please text climate to 79591, because I want you guys to learn more about how you can be involved, how you can, again, base level, how do you learn? How do you move in this? Is this for you? Is this something that you want to be a part of? I also encourage you to follow Hip Hop Caucus on all social media. And then if you want to check out our website, we have a newly branded website, www.hiphopcaucus.org, and you can learn more about what we're doing as well. But I can't express enough that when you talk about ecosystems and building something to help and uplift others, these women are at the pioneer. They're forefront of it. So thank you beautifully for your time, for your work. And I hope we can get this candid again, because I feel like we're not done. I feel like there's a part 2, part 3, part 4 that needs to happen. But yes, thank you all for coming to this incredible panel called The Cost of Creativity. Until the next time, we'll see you guys.
Bye.